Now we're going to have Dr. Stephen Biddle comment on his assessment of the strategy. Dr. Biddle has written extensively on Afghanistan and Pakistan and has written excellent pieces on both the military component as well as governance. So we look forward to your views.
Thank you. I was asked to look at the military strategy in the theater, but one of the things that I think is most interesting, actually, about the McChrystal military assessment of the situation in Afghanistan is that perhaps uniquely for a military strategic assessment document, it cites as co-equally necessary for success in this theater, not just the improvement of security conditions, a classical traditional military mission, but also the reform of governance in Afghanistan. And McChrystal's report argued quite explicitly that if we fail to do correctly either the security side of the mission or the governance side of the mission, we would suffer defeat. To my knowledge, this is the only such military strategic assessment I'm aware of that puts that kind of emphasis on governance and that accepts it as a military responsibility and not simply as something that can be handed off to or coordinated with or done in conjunction with State Department civilians, non-governmental organizations, or the UN. For reasons that I'm going to return to in a few minutes, there is actually a very important role for military resources, military instruments, and military activity in the reform of governance in Afghanistan. Our strategy in this theater, certainly since General McChrystal took command, has explicitly recognized this. Now, that having been said, the campaign plan that's directing our activities in this theater is much, much better developed in terms of implementing guidance for the actual activities of the resources we have in the theater on the security side of the campaign than it is on the governance side of the campaign. For the security side, there are nested instructions of instructions of instructions going from the theater level down to the battalion and the company level for all major parts of the theater. On the governance side, there is a preamble that talks about the importance of this activity and then almost nothing on what exactly to do about it. In the presence of that kind of situation, in which the military and the theater have been told this is very important, but they haven't been given a great deal of specific guidance on what exactly to do about it as a result, what military organizations tend to do is they revert to doctrine. They revert to the published written instructions for the conduct of this kind of campaign that they've all been trained in and familiarized with before they got to theater. And regrettably, U.S. military counterinsurgency doctrine at the moment has provisions for governance reform in it that are directly unhelpful with respect to the conduct of, I would argue, counterinsurgency in general, frankly, but certainly Afghanistan in particular, because the central thrust of the governance dimension of current U.S. military doctrine is capacity building. The mission of the military and counterinsurgency is to provide for host governments that don't have it a larger force of trained civil servants and public administrators who know how to keep the sewers operating, how to collect the trash, how to keep the electricity up and running, who know how to run a spreadsheet, can do PERT charts and all the other instrumentaria of the modern public administration profession. And this is not the central problem in Afghanistan. Heaven knows there is certainly a shortage of trained, capable public administrators in Afghanistan, either in the country in large or in particularly threatened locations like Helmand or Kandahar. That's not, however, the biggest problem associated with governance in Afghanistan. The biggest problem is not that a government that seeks legitimacy lacks the wherewithal it needs to realize its benign intentions. The problem is that significant elements of the government in Afghanistan have malign intentions. There is a significant interest divergence between the United States and the international community and significant elements of the Afghan government. In a situation in which significant elements of the government are actively predatory on the society they govern, improving their capacity makes them more efficient predators. It does not, in fact, align the hearts and minds of the Afghan population with their government and our activity. At worst, it makes things worse. At best, it's beside the point. Either way, it's not what we require. What we require, it seems to me, if we are actually going to address the real problem of governance reform in Afghanistan, which, as the McChrystal report suggested, is indeed essential for success in the undertaking, is to reconceptualize the problem of governance reform not as capacity building, but as dealing with the activities of a collection of, some have estimated perhaps as many as a dozen networks of malign actors, which function as old-fashioned patronage political machines designed to extract resources from the society and from other actors in the country and direct them upward to those higher in the pyramid in this hierarchically organized network of corrupt actors. In the process, they substantially disadvantage and existentially threaten the livelihoods of Afghan civilians who are not part of the network. If you are an Afghan civilian living in a part of the country dominated by a malign actor network of this kind, and one might take as an illustrative example the problem in Kandahar province, which is by no means the only such network in Afghanistan, but is the one that has been getting perhaps the most recent public attention, you have a reasonable basis to believe that if you are going to remain outside the patronage network that's governing most of official activity in the province of Kandahar, sooner or later, this network, when it gets around to it, is going to take everything you own. This is not a problem of being shaken down for petty checkpoint thievery at police depots. It's not a problem of paying a bit of baksheesh in order to get a driver's license. This is a problem of systematic misappropriation of public resources to the use of individuals within the network, especially but not limited to land. In an agrarian society in which land is the basis not just of wealth, but also of the basic livelihood and the wherewithal to conduct daily life for the majority of the population, and in a country in which title to land is remarkably ambiguous after a long generation of civil warfare and an active attempt by a number of combatants in those civil wars to destroy the previous system of whatever legal basis there had been for the allocation of land, when a network of malign actors centrally implicated in the government itself condemns for nominally public use private farmland and then redirects it for the economic benefit of those within the network, it's telling civilians outside the operations of this network that their very basis of their livelihood, their ability to feed their families and survive until the next week, is eventually up in the air because it could potentially be taken by a group of people over which you have no control and against whom you have no recourse. Are you going to go to the court system to get adjudication of your actual right to your farm when it's been condemned for public use? The network owns the courts. Are you going to go to the district or provincial government to get them to stand up to your rights? They are the heart of the malign actor network in the province of Kandahar. Are you going to go to the Americans and let them protect you against this? Well, as far as most Afghans can see, we are actively complicit in this entire process because our governance doctrine has been telling us to build capacity. So we have been out there trying to build up, empower, better train, and enable the very networks of malign actors within the government that are preying upon the population. And the population, not unreasonably, therefore looks at us as complicit in this. For a member of the Afghan population outside these networks, if you believe that they are as much of a threat to you as a reasonable person might conclude, your only recourse is to the Taliban. because the Taliban, alone among apparent authority and power sources, offers protection to people who are on the outs and are the losers in this system. And although the Taliban are notably unpopular, I have seen no systematic evidence, either nationally or even regionally in Afghanistan, to suggest that the Afghan people in any significant number would prefer the Taliban to any kind of non-predatory government alternative to the Taliban, will nevertheless go to the Taliban and offer access to society and to populated areas if they believe that their alternative to this is predation at the hands of a network that has its boot on all of the major channels of power and authority in the province. If this continues, we will lose the war, regardless of how aggressively we pursue the security part of our strategy, regardless of how well it's implemented, and regardless of how many troops are tied up in doing it.